Hey Frank, how's it going?
Hey Joe, thank you for joining me today. Glad we can discuss some investment and just investment type concepts within the CPG industry. Just to start off, do you mind going into some of your background and your history with investment, just so people have a better understanding of who you are and your background?
Of course. So, I started my career as an entrepreneur. So I had two tech startups very early in my career. One worked out well and one did not. So I've worn both sides of the entrepreneurial hat. The winning one and the not so winning. But I spent most of my time in the tech and startup worlds. But it was some introductions that I met, with you and through Warren a few years ago. Um, Opened up my eyes to CPG and to the beverage and snack space. Really, since meeting you guys and digging in more, it's opened up a whole new universe of startup challenges and just the unique types of investors that are in the space. Looking forward to digging into some of those findings today with you.
Absolutely. To start off, what are some of the scenarios in which startup CPG brands should avoid taking investment or seeking investment?
Okay, so this is a really good place to start because CPG brands should get as far as they can on what capital they can source themselves or through friends and family or even credit cards or savings, what they have in their savings account. The further a startup founder can get in the CPG space on their own, the more valuable they're going to be to a CPG minded investor. So the more traction you can get, the more velocity, the more sales you can get, the better position you're going to be in with an investor. So going to an investor pre-revenue means that you're probably going to end up giving away the vast majority of your business before you even start. So the further down the path you go, the more leverage you have with the investors and the more right you have as a founder to negotiate valuations and really the value of their money coming in.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Now, what would you say some of the key use of funds would be that create the most value when you're in the CPG startup phase? If you do get people that, let's say, do a friends and family round, is it going to be focusing on the product production and then just low cost marketing, or what would you say when it comes to the use of funds?
So Frank, I'm going to steal one of those. I'm going to steal a comment that I learned from Warren that I know
Okay.
that you've heard forever. Taste is the most important thing, and so I feel like the best thing that a startup founder can do is get to initial runs of production so that they can get their product into the space so they can get feedback. The earlier feedback you can get, the better. You can start building a tribe around that of supporters and people who want your brand and want your product. But you got to get it out. You got to make sure that it resonates with your target market. You got to make sure it tastes good and people engage with the brand and the beauty of what you've created. The sooner you can do that, the better, because you don't want to get too far down the path with a product that doesn't resonate with your target, both from the branding perspective, but most importantly, the taste.
It makes a lot of sense. And one of the big things that I see nowadays too is that marketing's changed quite a bit, even in the last 4 years. One of the biggest things you can do, as you just mentioned, is getting that market validation and that market feedback. And I see a lot of startup brands pouring a bunch of money into cold ads, doing things and just burning money, or doing things that just burn money. Whereas like you can produce a bunch of product and then give it to people. And like if it's a good tasting product, as you said, people resonate with it. One thing that comes to mind is Olipop. Never knew about the product. It was around for like 3 years before I tried it. And then I got a free can when I ordered my Whole Foods order, and I've been ordering Olipop ever since. So if you have a good tasting product and like you get it into the hands of somebody who loves the product from just the taste perspective, much less the branding, I think you're in a golden position then to have that product then scale and build that community around the product, like you said, the tribe. So
100%
excellent.
agree. And that actually reminds me of something else, Frank, that I thought this would be a good time to bring up, is let the product speak for itself. Let the branding, let the taste. You don't have to hire a Hollywood movie star, or you don't have to, you don't have to spend and give away all your equity to someone to be an ambassador of your brand, when the brand should do that itself.
Yep. And then you have what's interesting too is the combination nowadays of personal branding mixed with the company branding. So you're mixing and you're basically aligning the C-level and just the people involved with running the brand, their values with the brand's values. A good example is Jake Carl's with Midday Squares. They launched that product back in, I believe it was 2018, 2019. They've been launching and scaling ever since. But really what gave them the leverage was about 2 years ago when Jake Carl started making all of that content about himself at the retailers, like really getting himself as to be the face of the brand, building that like personal reputation that people really resonate with. And now he's got millions of followers across his platforms that love him and then in turn love his product.
I think you're spot on, Frank. That's a great example. I mean, many of the brands that BrandVault works with, they have very passionate founders. And so I completely agree with you. I think it's focusing on the founder and their why. Why did they create the brand? But just I love that. Involve and pull the founders into the conversations around the brand, and I think that's a critical ingredient to getting the word out.
It's getting to be more and more, especially since so many brands are launching. You have to have unique ways to differentiate yourself and really find creative ways to build that community around yourself and your brand. Because if you can't do that, and you can't get that attention, that's when people resort to the unfortunate scenarios of like they get sold by these agencies. Go spend five grand a month with a $5,000 budget on Facebook ads, and then I've seen this probably at least like just this year alone, like 30 plus times where like people have poured all this money into cold ads or just like poor marketing that's not focused. And then they're like, well, I didn't get any results. What do I do now? And then now they don't have any cash. They don't have any bankroll. They're sitting on a warehouse full of product, or worse, they don't have any product at all. And now they need funds to make more product.
Right.
So I 100% with you on that. Now, how would you say when a startup company or a startup individual is building a CPG brand, what are some of the core things that you want them to focus on their like first major pitch to investors, like a pre-seed or seed round?
Sure. So of course, what have you done already? I mean, what have you done with what resources you've had? So I think that's a critical thing for investors to understand. They want to know that you've put money and effort in. They're not going to invest in you if you have not put your own capital into the project. So have a story around why. Of course, why did you create this? What you've done to so far in this journey. And really, it's at this stage for startups, it's so much about that passionate founder, Frank. It's you gotta believe in it. It has to ooze out of you. Your product has to come out of you because
give it like a personality
of,
almost.
Everything you're putting into it. So I think that's really because these early investors, they're going to understand pivots are going to happen and changes and modifications. Your marketing may not be exactly like it is now than it is when you launch, but they want to believe in you as the founder that you're going to be able to face these problems and listen to feedback and utilize that in the product creation and launch. Really, it's getting to know, sharing who you are as a founder with these investors will get you the investments you're looking for versus just
Same as every other brand, essentially.
exactly. Yeah. Just you have to stand
yourself
out not only as a founder, but your brand has to as well.
Can you describe maybe a few just of the financial missteps that you've commonly seen when it comes to these early stage brands? I know we talked one example being they overspend on marketing that doesn't move the needle. What are some of the other financial missteps that you've seen when it comes to these early stage CPG products that makes them kind of unattractive to investors?
Debt.
Interesting. Okay.
So you shouldn't take out expensive debt until you have the revenue coming in to be able to afford to pay the debt. You can't come out and go to investors with a FCC filing against you, for black eyes from not paying your debtors. So just be very careful about debt. And there is debt out there for pre-revenue companies. It's very expensive and it will bankrupt you. And it's
higher percentage interest rates too, right? The very high interest rates. Yeah.
So please avoid debt at all costs. I mean, I mentioned earlier, the use of personal credit cards to get your brand going, but just be very careful with taking on debt and liens against your company, your product, without having the revenue to come in to cover it.
Makes a lot of sense. And we always tell people there's a number of different ways to launch these types of products nowadays. The two that I want to bring up real quick kind of ties right into that. The first one is we recommend around $100,000 minimum just to get the ball rolling, or at least like being able to acquire that 100,000 over a period of time. Maybe it's a 6 to 12 month period. And that comes into using those funds for the formulation, for the branding, website, having your any type of team members. If you need your own salary, some of these founders do need to pull 3 to 5K a month just to make ends meet, and a range of other things as well, like the ingredients, the production runs, any type of legal elements involved. There's a whole host of things. So we typically recommend that 100K mark, and then there's a few other methods as well. Now, we always tell people that if they can't hit that 100K mark, we recommend that they start really small, really niche in their own community, and doing those really smaller production pilot runs. Although they may not be profitable, you can at least get your project going and building that community on a very local level, and then just build it out from there. Especially if you only have 5 to 10K to start, it's really not much to work with in the CPG space. Is there anything else you would add to that when it comes to having that initial revenue to invest into your startup?
Yeah, and I like that. I like that number, Frank, because it's 100,000. It sounds a lot like a lot of money, and it is. I'm not saying that it's not, but typically through existing networks and friends and family, you should be able to come up with that. Either a founder or two, depending on who's all involved in the brand. They should come up with they should be able to come up with at least 10 grand each. And then you reach out to a few people within your network, or it shouldn't be that incredibly difficult to come up with the 100,000. And these guys and girls would be part of your founding team, and they would they would get ownership in the business.
And it's super important that when you have your founding team, they believe in the product just as much as the main founder, because you don't want people coming in and they don't have the same passion about the product. That's why I feel like we're seeing a lot of transition to functional sustainability and a range of other topics like different nootropics being incorporated versus just drinking like a Coke or a Pepsi, which isn't necessarily good for you in the first place. I'm seeing a big switch to products that actually have like a beneficial component to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's super important to have that, like we talked about earlier, the taste or the proof of concept, where it's like it tastes good, the mouth feels good, the overall product does what it says it does, is super important for securing investment. Wouldn't you agree?
It absolutely does. I think that's and just those initial runs. Again, it's about getting it out into the community and starting to
Yep.
build that tribe and getting getting the ability to do pre-orders. So that's another thing, Frank, that I think a lot of folks think that they need to order all this product and have it ready on the shelf. I mean, you can work with co-packers and do smaller runs and not have to worry about tying up all this extra cash in inventory that's just going to sit there. You need to be very careful and resourceful with the money that you do have to work with. We use the term runway, like when you're on an airplane and you're going down the runway to take off. The longer the runway, the more time the plane has to take off versus crashing. Everything you can do from a startup perspective to keep your runway as long as possible, the better you're going to be.
Every dollar counts.
Every dollar counts.
Yep. So when you're raising capital for these different CPG brands, and just based off of your experience, what are some of the big differentiators when investors choose to invest versus when they don't invest in these different startups?
If a brand can't prove or can't show to an investor that they have velocity and sales of $1 million or more, it gets really difficult for an investor to believe that brand has fully confirmed that there's a market for it. So I would say the revenue target's $1 million, but again, one of the things that I've seen as well is velocity is important as well. So if you're selling toward $1 million, with an urgency, with a great trajectory, that's very important. So overall revenue is very important to investors, as well as repeat customers. So the repeat customers, to your point earlier, Frank, confirms that the product tastes good, and a consumer is going back to buy it again and again. Show repeat traffic, repeat business is going to be really important.
It's super important as well from both a retail and a direct to consumer point of view. Direct to consumer is a little bit harder when it comes to RTD because you have the shipping costs, logistic costs associated with it. It's typically not as much of a viable option unless you have some like really unique situation where you have really good margins. I like to break marketing down into three components that most people intrinsically can understand. The first one is like attention. The second one is conversion, where can people engage with you, buy the product, engage with the brand in some way, shape, or form. And that third one is critical, which we just mentioned. And that's going to be, how do we retarget them? How do we get them into building that community, making them feel part of the community, and really engaging with them to increase that lifetime value of the clients over time? That's one of the most forgotten parts, which everybody focuses on top of funnel conversion, and then they forget you have people already in there. Let's focus on getting them more involved with the brand, more product in their hands, and how do we go about doing that?
Yeah,
so I think
exactly.
Really
make them a tribe member, pull them in, get them engaged in social, and make them feel like they're part. Make them, let them know. Because they are part of the brand, so they need to feel that.
Now, when it comes to strategic partnerships, how do you feel about that when it comes to early stage products? Now, it could be strategic partnerships such as, distribution or broker networks. It could be simply like having different types of influencers on an equity level or a paid level involved. How do you feel about those types of partnerships up front? Do they add value to investors, or is that something that they'll look at and say, maybe this is a little premature?
So no, that's a great question. So anytime you have a strategic alignment with a partner like a Brand Vault who's done it before and can de-risk the launch of a product because you've done it before and you can help founders that maybe have never done it, in the past, that's a very positive indicator to investors because that shows that the founder is coachable and can take advice from a strategic partner, and that they have the mindset to say, I have this great idea, but I don't really know exactly how to take that from the idea, to the store shelves, and to align with strategic partners that have done this hundreds of times with similar brands. An investor is going to be very interested in that because, again, Frank, is going to de-risk their investment because of the best practices a firm like BrandVault has put in place.
The learning curve burn is no joke. It's one of the biggest burns that early stage founders have when it comes to, they get all of these shiny objects. Like I get calls all the time from people and they say, well, I've got all this distribution. And then I ask them a simple question. Well, did you actually map out the sales channels with like the cost implications for each of those different distribution companies that you plan on working with, but also more to that, just like to the actual networks that they have to sell into? Is it your right audience? Is it going to be financially sustainable? Those types of things. So I 100% agree with you on that point. Now, when it comes to managing the actual funds, like, so let's say they do a family friends round or they self-invest into the project. What are some of the key things that they can do from like a financial literacy, financial management point of view to ensure that they're not burning funds at a excessive rate?
So no, that's really good, and again, that's where a community can really come in and help. There are very active CPG communities online. There's a lot of research out there. Seriously, you can Google, see, the particular markets that you're in. Like energy beverage industry. There's so many publications out there, so you can get a very good idea free just by doing some basic research on what expectations are from the market. So this way, you're not coming up with the valuations or expectations in a vacuum. You're actually going out and looking at what the market is doing, and this is all available to you. And it's very important you do this research.
Now, would you go so far as to make sure that they have like a financial tool that helps them keep track of each, like as we mentioned before, every dollar counts, like to keep track of like everything going in and out, making sure that they're keeping tabs on just like their financials overall as they get the financials in, and or like them investing their own funds in, to not overextend both themselves and or the funds that they have?
100%. And I got a trick here for you, Frank. So this is really easy. So, and you can do this on a spreadsheet. You don't even have to, or a free version of QuickBooks. This is not. I'm going to make it very simple. If there is a cost that you're spending, are you able to tie that to revenue? I know it's a little bit gray with marketing sometimes, Frank. You might push back on me a little bit on this, but you've got to think of, how can I take this $1 that I have in the bank and turn this into $4? And so if there are things you're spending money on that are not directly tied to sales and producing revenue, then stop it, cancel it, get out of it. You have to think very just simplistically, a very simple ratio, 1 to 4. How can I take this $1, turn it to 4? Whatever that number is, it can't be
Right.
1 to 1 or 1 to -1. Make it positive. And everything you do has to build upon building more revenue, especially in the early days here.
I 100% agree with that. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with like Jay Carl's. That's why I tell a lot of founders they really need to be the face of the brand now. So for example, most smartphones nowadays have a 4K camera. And you can take that $1, and we'll use $1 as an example of product, let's say, and you can go out, you can make content with people on your phone as long as you've got a really good personality that people can relate with. Even if you don't, it's good to just practice it and just like see if it's a viable option for you, because I know some people don't like to be on camera, and that's perfectly okay. But a lot of people have friends that have somebody who might be interested in doing that kind of stuff. And it's like a tactical form of marketing where it's like you don't have to hire a professional production facility or studio anymore to make you a video. You can take it on your smartphone, go out and hand product out to people, put it on your Instagram or TikTok, and now you've 25x less that you would spend from an actual professional process. And it's typically nowadays just as effective because people want to see the real. I mean, everything is so overproduced nowadays. This is like one of the metrics I've been seeing is like people just want to see the genuine you nowadays. So I think that's a really important part, and I'm glad we touched on that.
No, I agree. And it's so simple to go out and ask some strangers, to tell me what do you think? What's your feedback? Would you buy this again, and capture it all? And man, I mean, I can't think of a better storyline for a brand than to, get just real world endorsements like that.
Another example of low cost marketing would be like, for example, if you have like an energy product that's like a mixer, right? Go to local nightclubs or go to a local bar that you have a relationship with, maybe the owner or the bartender or something, and just ask them, hey, can I come in with a pack of my product? And can I make content in the bar? I'll tag you in my posts so your bar gets exposure locally. I get exposure on the internet. And it's like guerrilla marketing at its finest, low cost, high potential. I mean, obviously, and this is good market feedback too. Obviously, if you take it in there, people try it and they're like, this isn't good. Well, then you need to work back on the taste, the formulation. So that's one of the things that I always recommend as well for early stage startups.
I don't see a situation where you're going out in public and you're doing that. I don't see that being there's not a bad side to that. It's a win-win.
Right. All around. Now, what are some of the signs that you see when a CPG company is like in the ideal situation to scale up and then raise those types of funds?
So again, like we were talking about earlier, getting past that $1 million revenue threshold and increasing the velocity that you have in sales. It also eases and de-risks it for an investor if you have distribution lined up already, and you're actually getting sales and orders through distribution and retail partners. Think in terms of, if put yourself in the investor's shoes, and do everything you can to de-risk their investment, just like you would your investment that you've put into the brand. And so you do that by selling more and getting some, stronger, bigger contracts with Trader Joe's, Costco, the ones. I mean, and not only the contracts, but also those initial orders, those stocking orders. And then when you can start showing repeat orders, Frank, to Costco, then what you've done is you've really, really done a great job of de-risking this investment for an investor.
And it also gives you an opportunity to get your product into different types of sales channels. So like the people shopping, for example, at Costco are potentially different than people shopping at like a Safeway or a Sprouts or like a Whole Foods. So it's like you also get a bigger picture of, and this is assuming you can afford to do these types of deals. Obviously, the production run needs to be there, the supply chain, all of that stuff needs to make sense in order to do it. But it gives you a big understanding of how and where your product sells the best. I saw a post recently on LinkedIn where there was this company and they got like one of the best emails you can get from Costco wholesale. They literally sent them an email that said, we sold out within the first 2 days. We need to place an order next week, and then we'll place recurring orders every week. until we see a drop in the sales velocity and we can revisit this. And I know a 3-line email, and that singular email was probably worth, I would say, 100,000, 200,000 worth of revenue for them. So it's an incredible feeling too. When you see your product on the shelf, now you know living, breathing product, and it just feels so good.
And actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I understand that there are sometimes, like what you're talking about, that there could be a need for a lot of money to ramp up production because of the orders that you're getting. So you don't have to sell your equity to raise money to do that. There are components out there. There's PO financing. There are new methods of funding situations like this specifically for CPG companies that you need to look at and be aware of. Reach out to us if you need some help around that. Don't, just because you're getting these massive orders, don't think you have to do another fundraise. You don't. There are options available to you that are non-dilutive in nature.
And that's purchase order funding, right? That's basically leverage-based funding, correct?
Right. So the important thing to consider there is just making sure that you have enough margin to support the fees associated with this. So again, Frank, this is one of those situations where sometimes you may just have to make a decision. Like sometimes when you're starting out, your margins are just really razor thin. Most important thing is that you cover any kind of debt cost that you have, even though it might be temporary. This is not a situation where I want you to think you're going to be losing money or breaking even forever. This is to get you over a hurdle that you would then be able to open up, either cost savings through volume or, velocity, and then you'll have conversation with investors a lot differently. Point is, I don't want you to react to big orders through selling equity, not out of the gate.
One of the things that I've seen too is if you've got good credit and you've got a good relationship with, let's say, a bank or some other institution, they'll lend you, from what I've seen, like the production cost without like the actual margin on top for that production run for the purchase order. So like, let's say the purchase order's for 100K, it costs you 70K. They'll give you that 70K, and then you just pay the interest back on that once you actually get like the finances through the purchase order deal once it's completed.
Absolutely. There are resources out there. So believe me, this is a great problem to have.
What a great problem to have. That's one of the better ones. Now, wrapping up here, just a few more questions. What advice would you give to CPG startups about navigating the investment landscape in some type of downturn, economic downturn like we're currently in? All the costs for everything are up. The dollar's worth less right now. What are some ways that you can recommend to early stage startups to navigate that?
Okay. Very simply, Frank, don't assume you're going to raise capital.
That's a good one. I like that a lot.
It is extremely difficult. Frank, last year was brutal, right? It was brutal across the entire private market sector. That was not an area, maybe except for AI, that didn't have a rough year last year. So assume that no investor is going to put money in. So if you can and things align and then it happens, that's fantastic. But build your brand as if you are on your own. You're on your own. You have your co-founder. You have a few friends. You have a small little community. That's what you got.
From a startup, in my perspective, if you surround yourself with great people, you can, in most cases, work on building something really great.
And building something great kind of goes into really the second message here is build to get to revenue, build to get product sold, pre-sold, whatever method you have, or the consumer space now, Frank, we've seen this with several brands. They're okay if they order online and have to wait a week or two. It's okay. Set expectations with your clients or customers that, we're gonna get some pre-orders done, and then we're gonna run and we're gonna get we're gonna get you your product, but it's not gonna be shipped in 2 days.
Right.
Just set those expectations. Pre-order. Get as much of that done as you can. Get the revenue in, so you don't have to rely on investors.
Makes a lot of sense. And I have just one last question, and I'll open it up to anything else you want to add. What is the role of insurance when it comes to early stage startups? Is it super important to have comprehensive insurance to cover any type of issues? Is that something investors look at?
That will come into be a factor when you're doing larger runs through a co-packer. But in the very beginning, Frank, I think you need to just go with the least amount of insurance that's required. But when you do start to get into the larger production runs, again, you need to assume problems are going to happen.
Yeah.
Co-packer's going to screw up. Something's going to happen along the way. And having that insurance could be the difference between you going into bankruptcy or not.
And that's so true. I follow a gentleman named Matt Matros on LinkedIn, and he had this issue. I think it was back in 2018 or in that range somewhere. He had a $3 million run of his RTD, and turns out that there was a microscopic hole in the cans that were produced. His insurance company wouldn't cover it. He couldn't sue the can manufacturer, and the production facility was like, "You're out of luck." So he was basically out all of this money. Now, he's a pretty crafty entrepreneur, so he was able to recover from that. In fact, he actually made his own insurance company. He founded an insurance company specifically for CPG because of that issue. So I think it's important to note that even if you have insurance, big problems can still happen. And it's important to understand those types of risks as well, because there's things that could pop up that you'll never expect. I mean, I see recalls every day of, there's some type of contaminant in the product, and now they have to recall their entire product line. And most of the time that responsibility falls on the brand itself, most of the time.
It does. It does. It really does fall back on the brand. And again, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, it's important for the founder or the brand owner to just think rationally. Putting your livelihood and the business on the line with a production run. Make sure you have the right coverage. But in the early days, I don't think an investor is going to have any issue with basic insurance, because the runs are going to be a lot smaller.
Right.
I will say, Frank, though, that one area that a founder should look at is when they have their brand, do some basic copyright outreach or research, and make sure that they can and go ahead and go down the path of getting copyright and trademark protection on your brand.
Agreed.
Because that will be a question that comes up with these earlier stage investors, to make sure that they know that they are going to be putting money into a brand that's not going to be sued because they're infringing.
And the last thing people want to have happen is you either start a brand and you put your own money into it. Now all of a sudden you're getting sued, or there's some other company that has that trademark, and they're like, now you're in big trouble, because now you got to fight them, and then now you have to rebrand. You have to pull your product. That's a whole nother thing. I agree with you. One of the key things we always tell people at BrandVault is we want you to understand that you can get that trademark. And in fact, if you can afford it, that's one of the first things that you want to apply for. Because if you end up, and I've even seen this before, I've seen people try and snatch the trademark from you. If they see you don't have it and they see your products taking off, they'll go and try and steal the trademark from
100%.
you. And then it's oh, now I've got an even bigger problem. Now they're going to ransom my trademark to me, basically. Now,
and then you have to prove to the trademark commission that you were actually there first, and it's
and that's a whole thing, because you're dealing with the government. Excellent. Well, Joe, any other points that you would like to make a note of here?
No, I think we covered a lot of the important questions. Would love to hear back from any folks that watch this, that have feedback or commentary. Again, just try to get as far as you can on your own. Focus on revenue production rather than trying to raise funds. And just build as long of a runway as possible, and assume it's going to take a little bit longer, right, Frank?
Yeah, it always takes a little bit longer. It's never going to be within the time frame you expect. There's always going to be things that come up, especially newer founders. Like, they don't know all the intricacies. Like, there's certainly things that are going to take 3-4 days of your time just pop up, and it's like, now I have to learn about this. One of the things that we do at BrandVault is we do help streamline that entire process. We have typically 5 steps that we follow. It's, ideation. What's your idea? How is it unique? What's the differentiators? Product creation, taste first. What's the brand going to be? How's it going to resonate to the type of audience and the type of ingredients that you have in the product? The next thing, infrastructure, both digital and physical infrastructure, your website, having just all of your socials locked in, having just your operational side of things locked in. One of the things I work with on founders all the time is it's super important that you have a streamlined operations system set up, because I see it all the time where founders are all over the place, and it's kind of like a mess on their back end, eating away at their time. And people don't realize half hour here, half hour there, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes, that adds up to a lot of time over the course of a year that you could have been focusing on things that matter versus having to do the management of your actual operational system. So I think that's super important. The next thing is market validation. And so that's one of the things we discuss, which is really ensuring, whether it's guerrilla marketing or just direct consumer marketing, if you can have the margins to do that, or if it's testing retail settings, combination of all those things, just getting that feedback loop going is super important in the early stages to make sure that people love your product, they love the branding, it stands out on the shelves. And then the 5th thing would be ready to then scale and grow. And so we find either funding or find the different methods that we can do that. Ideally, like you said, if you have the revenue to support that in the early stage, that's the best case scenario, although 100%. It is a rare one.
But I would definitely suggest anyone reading this or watching this, leverage a resource like BrandVault and de-risk your life significantly by using experts. Even if you've done this before, these guys have these guys can help.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Really appreciate you tuning in today. If you want to know more, you can visit our website, BrandVault360.com. I'll have a link below in the YouTube video. Alternatively, you can find me, Frank Berefsky, on LinkedIn. You can also find Joe. He's on LinkedIn as well. And I'll have those links below. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And I look forward to working with any of you that have a potentially very unique product, very unique idea with a passion to grow your business. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you for joining in.